Season 4 of The Boys wrapped up a little bit ago. It's true though, The Boys used to be like my favorite show. If you don't believe me, here's a picture of me dressed as Huey. Hilarious, first of all, but more than that, emblematic of the fact that I loved this show. I still love this show, and that's why I kind of want to talk about it and see what's bugging me about specifically the previous season, but also what's bugging me sort of going into the final season.
I can't believe this is fucking happening to me again.
What? And it all comes out of love because I want the final season to be great. So let's try to dig in a little bit and see exactly what the deal was.
Violence is power.
So before all that, let's take a second to remind ourselves what made The Boys so great in the first place. Adapting those Garth Ennis comics in the first few seasons from something that was kind of more like shock-to-shock storytelling, I guess. It seemed like the priorities of the comics were much more focused on freaking out the reader and shock value, while also kind of providing sort of a thin political satire on like Bush era politics and like early 2000s America, sort of. What made the show so great was taking that source material and adapting it to this sort of postmodern look at superhero storytelling nowadays, and using it as a way to look at celebrity status, to look at like these multi-million-dollar media companies, and provide sort of a different spin on the political satire that the original source material was doing. I mean, yeah, while the show now seems like it's a really thin political satire with very obvious metaphors to the point where the creators even coming out and just like flat out telling you what the show's about. Back then it was a little bit more nuanced. While it was never like a secret that it was a satire, it felt like it was a little more clever in what it was actually saying, rather than kind of feeling like it's just angry at what's going on in the world right now. It's a crazy achievement, basically taking what if Superman had a dick of the original comics and adapting it into something that's worth talking about. So now we're on to season 4, and there are a few things that have kind of shifted over time that feel kind of either really sudden or just like, I don't know, inconsistent or disappointing. So let's see. Originally, they used to have these sort of unique and creative powers for each different soup, and they would show you why they're a sleazeball and how their power kind of reflects them being that type of sleazeball, and that was fun. Now, they have this thing where like super strength and like super durability are like a given to like any soup. Maybe that was there earlier on, but now it really feels like that's just like part of the base package, which it didn't really feel like before necessarily. You know, they are getting increasingly less creative with the power set. I mean, even the like Spider-Man guy this season was sort of the one standout. What if Spider-Man's webs came out of like an asshole? Like, okay, come on guys, we could do better than that. I mean, even to the point where by the time we get to season 4, we get these characters that we're just kind of told are soups, and we don't even get to see them like do their thing. You know, we get Tech Knight, who's supposed to be this like Iron Man, Batman, Bruce Wayne type of hero guy, and we never even see him in costume. I don't know. I feel like to a point you're missing out on the potential of what the show's concept is. So now everybody who's a soup kind of becomes this unkillable, like lifting a car over their head type of person. Like Victoria Newman literally gets shot in the head first episode of this season and bounces right back up, no problem. And to me, that sort of just makes things a little less interesting. I mean, there's a big problem where Kimiko basically, every single action sequence is getting ripped in half or maimed or whatever, and there's never any tension because, you know, she's like a human fucking piece of paper. You could rip her apart and then she'll just come right back together. Going back to Newman for a second, like those powers don't match like what her deal is. Her head popping thing is great because she keeps it a secret and she's a politician, and that's reflective of who she is, but having any kind of like raw physical strength, I feel like is totally opposite to what her deal is. It's a little bit weird. But something I was excited about was to see how the roster of the Boys team kind of changes up over time, like the 7 does. One of the most exciting moments in the finale for me was Newman calling in to try to switch sides.
Vicky?
Huey, it's me. I want to change sides. I want to be a boy.
I think there's a surgery for that.
But that transitions us into one of the most messy aspects of the previous season in general, and that's Starlight. It feels like they just kind of didn't know what to do with her once she joined the team. She fell into the background. And worse than that, she hardly ever uses her powers. Everybody jokes on the fact that she like lights up her eyes and you know, her hands glow, and then she dials it back a beautiful metaphor for what this show is doing with its plot. But yeah, she's become a joke, and that sucks to watch. I fucking loved Huey and Starlight's relationship early on. They had this fun banter, they had this like understanding of each other, and they were also like empathetic toward each other. You know, they were two people that were navigating this new kind of weird, sort of grisly world with optimistic outlooks and slowly getting their optimism chipped away by the realities of the situation. And that's something that they bonded over. And now that it feels like they're both drenched in blood every other episode, that they both kind of become the same sort of jaded mush of a character. And you're losing some of those differences, which would make their relationship interesting. And maybe that's why they choose not to write about it so much, because they've kind of become so similar. Her dynamic with Firecracker, I just don't buy at all. I understand that they're trying to find some sort of dynamic for the two to have, but to just say that Starlight was like a jerk to her at, you know, a pageant, she like called her fat or something one time, I just don't buy it, which is a problem. And look, like, while I appreciate that they're going back to sort of the roots of the character, and I like that they're talking about the fact that Starlight was religious and comes from this background, I think that's great to call back to. It really feels like somebody just kind of looked at a whiteboard of her character traits and they were like, oh shit, yeah, right, we forgot. Let's add that in there. Their dynamic sort of comes to a head when Firecracker goes on live TV and reveals this information about Starlight. And while I like that reveal, and it was a legit surprising moment, and also great just to watch Starlight wreck Firecracker's shit, that was awesome. Ultimately, it kind of led to this weird dynamic between the viewer and Starlight and Huey's relationship, I feel. Because at first we were sort of intimately let in on what they were doing, how they got to know each other and how they grew to love each other. But now it kind of treats their relationship like it's this thing off to the side, and something that I honestly forget just watching the show. I forget about their relationship pretty often. Now we're told about this kind of monumental conversation that they must have had and this monumental thing in their relationship, only for it to be completely off screen. All right, so you might argue, oh, that's a little dark, you know, for a show about a guy fucking an octopus. But like, the first season was able to juggle all these things tonally, and they were able to do that tastefully and with respect to all the characters and the situation, even in this like ridiculous, silly world. And she's honestly just a character that feels like she's a little bit spent, and it feels like she's reached her arc and now there's not really a place to go with her outside of dynamics with other characters. And if these are the type of dynamics that we're going to be giving her, maybe it's best to just kind of move on from her. And it's even more disappointing when the finale comes on and they introduce this doppelganger idea. They have these two Starlights duking it out, and I got excited because I thought that they were finally going to address some of these issues that Starlight's been having. And also, at the end, allow her to get her powers back. And they honestly just kind of use it as a way to almost regress her character, which is not helpful. It really is, unfortunately, making her come across unlikable. She flips out on Huey for doing something that was completely out of his control. And then they just give her powers back at the end anyway. Totally separate from this whole interaction. So I'm baffled by that. That's incredible to me. What the hell? What are we doing with Butcher, guys? Everybody loves this guy. He's a shit talker. He loves this word. Cunt. And he's one of the few characters that actually moves shit along. So all that being said, why do we give him a fight club? Who wanted to see that? I didn't want to see that. As if Billy Butcher, of all the characters, needs a devil on his shoulder. Billy Butcher is the devil on the shoulder. He doesn't need another one. And I get that you want to use Jeffrey Dean Morgan. He's a great actor, and even in this weird, thin role, he's super charismatic. But it's just kind of a weird choice. And that's not even mentioning how obvious the twist is, right? Which is really disappointing on a show that's already kind of meta and sort of pokes fun at tropes of the genre, to do something so like basic seeming and so obvious, and to just present it so straight. I was at least expecting some sort of twist on a twist, or some sort of version of this sort of typical Fight Club. What was that other movie? Tully? No. He was torturing that dude. Awesome. Yeah, all power to him. Butcher's a dick, and that's cool to see. Him kind of sacrificing more morals and more parts of himself to achieve his end goals. That's cool. It runs into a rhythm that, unfortunately, is sort of where I'm getting at when it comes to the bigger problem of this show.
Oh, we were right there, man!
Speaking of somebody who loves this show, let's get right down to it. They have a problem when it comes to structure and when it comes to how they're plotting out these seasons, because they just keep repeating themselves. We're repeating the same beats. If this was a movie or a shorter series, then that's fine to do it once or twice even. They've done it, like 3 or 4 times where Butcher has left the team, or gets kicked out of the team because he went too far this time. Fine, but then the team realizes, you know what, we kind of need Butcher, or he comes back in a crucial moment, and it's just kind of really run its course, and it's falling into the trope of any other type of series, which is like sitting around, waiting around, knowing that nothing of consequence is really going to happen until the end of the season. And that's a big problem I had with season 4, because after episode 2 or 3, it really got slow. It felt like nothing was progressing. Big things happen this season. You know, Frenchie goes to jail. He turns himself in, for Christ's sake. He kills like his boyfriend type guy. But I didn't feel the consequence of that, because I know he's gonna break out, or he's gonna, you know, be on parole or whatever, and it won't end up mattering. Characters die, but they only die in the finale. Status quos shift in a way that you know for a fact they're all gonna come back together. You know, I've been waiting for so long for Butcher to flip this switch and become full villain mode, even to the other members of the boys. And now that they're doing that, it feels like they've already done it 3 other times. It really just kind of takes the wind out of the sails. You end the season with the boys split up, but you also spent most of the season with the boys split up. The final result is that these characters just kind of end up seeming stupid, you know, or like unopportunistic. When Butcher and Homelander are in the same room, that's your final confrontation right there. Every time Homelander is in the room with Butcher, I'm thinking like, why not just laser him and you're over this? Every time that Homelander and Butcher are in the same room together, I'm like, what are you doing? What are you doing? And unfortunately, there are only so many times where you could bring us right to the edge just to walk things back before people stop giving a shit. Oh hey, actually, that kind of reminds me of, who else was expecting Homelander just to fly into the Oval Office, murder whoever's there, take the chair, and take over? Season 1 Homelander, he walks into the room, shit changes. People clench, and you're like, whoa, what's this guy up to? What's he gonna do? Because he's so unpredictable. Now, we've seen him under the thumb of so many people. We've seen Homelander kind of bested in a lot of ways, even like hand-to-hand wise by some of our characters, and it makes him just less scary. It's almost like the more we spend time with Homelander, the more we sort of understand Homelander, the less scary he becomes. When he's the center point of a lot of the tension of your show, especially earlier on, that's a problem. Once you have your main characters kicking the shit out of your main villain and he runs away, there's only so many places you can go from there. And when that's like the halfway point of your show, you better raise the stakes. My biggest problem by far with Homelander is his whole deal is he is walking on a razor's edge. And there are so many fucking moments where it seems like he's finally gone off the rails. Oh, this is it. This is the moment we've all been waiting for. It's the moment where he drops the facade and becomes full-on dictator, villain, whatever. And they walk it back every time. Episodes end, seasons end, where you're like, okay, here's the moment. Here's the consequential, finally, status quo is going to change moment. And it just never sticks. And some of these are great moments, and any of them would have been fine to be like the definitive moment. When he lasers that guy and realizes he still has the public's love, what is stopping him from killing whoever the hell he wants? I know why he's not doing that, because we have another season. You know, and when I'm starting to notice these things, and when the structure of this whole show points itself out to me so obviously, it really takes you out of it. It's a shame because Anthony Starr is clearly the standout of the show performance-wise and does an excellent job with what he's given, but there's only so many times I could see him put on that fake smile and you know, show the facade cracking before it just seems like an empty threat. I guess what I'm trying to figure out is why the season 4 finale didn't exactly do it for me, and I point these things out to hopefully see improvements on these things going forward, and more so to just try to understand my own kind of viewing of it. And it really feels like the show is just kind of becoming a victim of its own formula, where it seems like a lot of these bigger moments have the wind taken out of them because we've seen them so many times before. Granted, it is the last season coming up, so maybe they will be a little more ballsy with some of the things that they're doing. Kind of ready for the status quo on this thing to be shaken up. And what better time to do that than the last season? So, still excited. We'll see what happens. Yeah, them's the breaks. Those are my thoughts. That's it. Go with God.
Is that girl a boy too?